From mad scientists in fiction like Dr. Frankenstein to real-life breakthroughs with a dark twist, science has always walked a thin line between genius and disaster. Well, sure, it's given us smartphones and space travel, but every so often, it delivers experiments so shocking, they leave us questioning if the cost of progress is just too high. These aren't just normal mistakes. These are the nightmares where curiosity, ambition, or outright recklessness went off the rails. So, join us as we dive into 15 times science went too far and created a nightmare. Prepare to be amazed, horrified, and maybe just a little thankful you weren't a part of these shocking experiments. Number 15. Frankenmouse. Remember the ear mouse that shocked the world? While many believed it was a product of genetic engineering, the truth is a bit less dramatic, but no less creepy. Frankenmouse wasn't engineered. He was stitched. Scientists crafted a biodegradable ear-shaped scaffold and seeded it with bovine cartilage cells. To bring the ear to life, they stitched the scaffold onto the back of a nude mouse, a mouse with no immune system. The mouse's blood vessels nourished the growing cartilage until the scaffold dissolved, leaving behind a fully formed human ear. Though this experiment terrified the public, its purpose was groundbreaking. The ear proved that scientists could grow human body parts for medical use. While it wasn't a genetically modified mouse, it was a vivid demonstration of how biotechnology could push boundaries. The visual was unforgettable, a tiny mouse carrying an ear on its back. It blurred the line between science and Frankenstein-like imagination, sparking debates about just how far we should go. Number 14. Two-headed dogs. Vladimir Demikov was a pioneer in organ transplantation, credited with performing the first coronary artery bypass surgery. But his legacy took a darker turn with his infamous two-headed dog experiments. Using advanced surgical techniques, Demikov attached the head, shoulders, and front legs of a puppy onto the neck of a fully grown German Shepherd. Both heads were functional, able to eat, drink, and move independently. While the surgeries were technically successful, the dogs didn't survive long due to tissue rejection. Over his career, Demikov created 20 two-headed dogs, with the longest-lived surviving only a month. The experiments horrified the world, raising ethical questions about the cost of scientific progress. Despite the grotesque nature of these experiments, they contributed to advancements in human organ transplantation. Demikov's work laid the foundation for the life-saving surgeries we see today. Number 13. Bat bombs. During World War II, desperate times called for bizarre measures, and the bat bomb experiment is one of the strangest examples. Lytle Adams, a Pennsylvania dentist, proposed an unconventional weapon, bats carrying tiny incendiary devices. The idea was to exploit bats' natural instincts. Equipped with explosives, they would roost in the wooden buildings of Japanese cities and ignite devastating fires. The U.S. Marine Corps captured thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats and developed miniature bombs to strap onto their backs. Test runs showed promise. Some bats successfully flew into structures and triggered fires. However, the experiment also backfired when armed bats accidentally set part of a U.S. military base on fire during a test. Ultimately, the project was abandoned in 1943 as the atomic bomb took priority. While the bat bomb never saw combat, it remains a surreal footnote in military history, a strange intersection of biology, ingenuity, and the desperate lengths humanity will go to during the war. Number 12. Nazi medical experiments. Few moments in history are as horrific as the medical experiments carried out by the Nazis during the Holocaust. Led by Josef Mengele, often called the Angel of Death, these experiments were nothing short of atrocities disguised as science. Mengele targeted twins, subjecting them to inhumane tests in an attempt to prove Aryan racial supremacy. Many died from his experiments, their bodies mutilated for study. The brutality didn't stop there. Prisoners were exposed to freezing temperatures, low-pressure chambers, and infectious diseases in the name of aviation and military research. Women were forcibly sterilized, and children starved in experiments designed to test the limits of human endurance. One haunting case involved a mother forced to watch her baby starve. She ultimately chose to end its suffering herself. Some of the doctors responsible were tried as war criminals after the war, but Mengele escaped to South America, dying in 1979. These experiments serve as a grim reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the critical need for ethical oversight in science. Number 11. The attack of the killer mosquitoes. Ever heard of entomological warfare? Sounds like something out of a sci-fi horror movie, but back in the 1950s, it was a very real and terrifying experiment conducted by the U.S. Army. During Operation Dropkick in 1955, 600,000 mosquitoes were airdropped into predominantly black neighborhoods in Florida. This wasn't just any swarm, these were potentially infected insects, and the result was widespread illness among the residents. The following year, Operation Big Buzz repeated the mosquito drop, targeting similar communities, and although the official results are undocumented, the implications are chilling. As if mosquitoes weren't horrifying enough, the military also experimented with tropical rat fleas in Operation Big Itch, where the fleas were loaded into missiles and dropped over Utah. These experiments were as bizarre as they were unethical, sparking outrage and fear. They revealed a dark chapter in military history, one where insects were weaponized against civilians, raising questions about consent, ethics, and just how far governments are willing to go in their pursuit of power. Number 10. The Stanford Prison Experiment. This one remains one of the most unsettling examples of how power can corrupt even the most ordinary people. Philip Zimbardo, a psychology professor, set up a mock prison at Stanford University and randomly assigned 24 male students to roles of guards or prisoners. What was meant to be a harmless study on behavior escalated into a psychological nightmare within days. The guards became shockingly abusive, dehumanizing the prisoners with cruel punishments and psychological torment. The prisoners broke down emotionally, some begging to leave the experiment. Zimbardo himself, acting as the prison superintendent, became blind to the ethical catastrophe unfolding. Originally planned for 2 weeks, the study was terminated after just 6 days. It exposed the terrifying ease with which individuals adopt abusive behaviors when given unchecked power. Beyond a cautionary tale, it forces us to question how authority and circumstance can strip people of their humanity, leaving us wondering, could this happen to anyone? Number 9. Project MK Ultra, 1950s to 1970s. If you thought mind control was the stuff of science fiction, think again. Project MK Ultra was a CIA-backed experiment that aimed to develop techniques for brainwashing and psychological manipulation. The participants, many of whom were unsuspecting civilians, were subjected to horrors like forced LSD ingestion, hypnosis, and extreme sensory deprivation. The agency's end goal? To create perfect spies or interrogators who could control minds. But the reality was a nightmare. Many victims suffered severe psychological damage, with some pushed to the brink of insanity. The program operated in secrecy for years, and when its existence was exposed, much of the evidence had been conveniently destroyed. MK Ultra shows us the horrifying extent to which governments can exploit their citizens in the name of security. Beyond its sinister legacy, it serves as a grim warning. When power operates in the shadows without accountability, it can create monsters out of even the most well-intentioned institutions. All right, now let's move to Number 8. The Milgram Experiment. The Milgram experiment revealed something profoundly unsettling about human nature: our alarming willingness to obey authority, even when it means causing harm. Psychologist Stanley Milgram invited participants to administer electric shocks to a learner, an actor, for every wrong answer in a quiz. Despite hearing screams of pain, most participants followed the instructions to continue, even delivering what they believed were fatal shocks. Why? Because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to. This chilling revelation showed that 65% of people will abandon their moral compass under the right conditions. The creepy experiment raised uncomfortable questions about personal responsibility and how easily authority can override our sense of right and wrong. Milgram's findings are as relevant today as they were in the 1960s. They remind us to critically evaluate orders, question authority, and recognize our capacity for harm, not as a condemnation, but as a call to be better, even under pressure. Number 7. The Monster Study, 1939. The Monster Study was an experiment with good intentions but catastrophic consequences. Conducted by Wendell Johnson and his graduate student Mary Tudor, the study aimed to explore how different types of feedback, positive and negative, impacted speech development in children. But the chosen participants were orphans, many of whom were already vulnerable. Half of the children were praised and encouraged for their speech, while the other half were criticized harshly, even for minor imperfections. The results were heartbreaking. The children in the negative group developed severe stutters and emotional trauma, effects that persisted for the rest of their lives. While the study aimed to understand speech therapy better, it ultimately became a chilling lesson in how psychological manipulation can cause irreversible harm. It serves as a stark reminder that even well-meaning research can turn monstrous if ethics are ignored. Children are not experiments. They're human beings who deserve care, respect, and protection. Number 6. What do you get when you cross a spider and a goat? Silk is one of the toughest natural materials, but try getting it from spiders, and you'll quickly see the problem. Spiders are tiny, territorial, and produce minimal amounts of silk. So, what do you do when nature isn't cooperating? You give it a nudge, of course. Enter the bizarre world of spider goats. In 2010, researchers at the University of Wyoming took the gene responsible for spider silk production and spliced it into goats. The result? Goats that produce silk proteins in their milk. Yes, you read that right. Essentially, these animals look and act like ordinary goats, but their milk contains the building blocks for spider silk. Harvest the milk, extract the silk, and you've got yourself a whole new way to produce this super strong material. It's both fascinating and unsettling. While scientists insist these goats are perfectly normal, the thought of spider DNA mingling with livestock is enough to make anyone do a double take. It's a glimpse into the strange possibilities of genetic engineering and the ethical dilemmas that come with them. Number 5. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study is a haunting reminder of how science, when driven by prejudice and greed, can become a tool of oppression. Conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service, this study enrolled over 600 African American men, 399 of whom had syphilis, under the promise of free health care. Instead, these men were intentionally left untreated, even after penicillin was discovered as a cure in the 1940s. For 40 years, the participants suffered as the disease destroyed their bodies, spread to their families, and even led to death. The researchers, hungry for data, showed no concern for the men's lives. Even worse, the participants were never informed of their condition or the available treatment. This grotesque abuse of trust highlights how racism and unethical science can intertwine to exploit the vulnerable. The study's legacy is a painful but critical lesson. Science must always be grounded in compassion, transparency, and respect for human dignity, because anything less is inexcusable. Now guys, let's move to number 4. Unit 731. Experiments. Unit 731 is arguably the darkest chapter in scientific history, where the pursuit of knowledge crosses every moral boundary imaginable. During World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army conducted barbaric experiments on prisoners of war and civilians, all in the name of biological and chemical warfare research. Victims were subjected to unthinkable horrors: live dissections without anesthesia, forced exposure to deadly pathogens like anthrax and plague, and chemical weapons tests. Thousands died in unimaginable pain, their suffering reduced to mere data points for military advancement. While some of the findings were later used in warfare research, the cost of human suffering was beyond comprehension. Unit 731 serves as a reminder of how science, when detached from humanity, can become a tool of pure evil. It's a story that demands we never forget the victims and ensures that the ethical foundations of science are never compromised again. Some boundaries should never be crossed. Number 3. Trinity Test. Some doors once opened can never be closed. On July 16, 1945, humanity unlocked a power so immense that the world would never be the same. This was the Trinity Test, the first detonation of a nuclear bomb in the New Mexico desert. A culmination of 3 years of relentless effort under the Manhattan Project, the bomb was intended to end World War II by intimidating the Nazis and forcing Japan into surrender. But before the explosion, one haunting question lingered. Could this detonation ignite the Earth's atmosphere, annihilating all life? Scientists assured the odds were nearly impossible, though that wasn't exactly comforting. When the bomb exploded, it unleashed a light brighter than the sun and a mushroom cloud that towered over the desert. The test was a success, leading to the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Number 2. Large Hadron Collider. When the Large Hadron Collider began operation near Geneva, Switzerland, it sparked excitement, fear, and wild speculation. This engineering marvel, built by CERN, was designed to smash protons together at nearly the speed of light, replicating conditions moments after the Big Bang. In 2012, the LHC achieved its crowning triumph: the discovery of the Higgs boson, the particle that explains why matter has mass. However, not everyone was thrilled. Headlines warned of doomsday scenarios. Could these experiments create a mini black hole that would swallow the planet? Scientists reassured the public that even if micro black holes formed, they'd evaporate in microseconds. Cosmic rays create higher energy collisions in our atmosphere every day, and Earth has been fine for billions of years. Number 1. Cincinnati Radiation Experiments. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. In the Cold War's desperate race to understand nuclear survival, some lines were crossed that can never be erased. Between 1960 and 1971, Dr. Eugene Sayanger, a radiologist, conducted experiments funded by the Pentagon on 88 unsuspecting cancer patients, many of them African American. These patients were told they were receiving groundbreaking treatment, but in truth, they were human guinea pigs in a grim study on radiation exposure. Patients were subjected to intense 1-hour doses of radiation, causing nausea, vomiting, and severe confusion. For many, the exposure proved fatal, with deaths attributed to radiation poisoning. What's worse, the participants were never informed of the true nature of the experiment or its military funding. The Cincinnati radiation experiments are a dark chapter in medical history, a cruel reminder of how easily trust can be exploited. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.